The battle had ended just hours ago. Smoke still rose from the broken ground, and the air smelled like burnt metal. Captain Ray Mercer stepped over fallen machines and cracked stone, his boots crunching softly. He wasn't looking for anything, just making sure no surprises were left behind. That's when he saw her. Half buried in the wreckage was a strange figure, tall, silver-skinned, and wrapped in glowing chains. Her armor looked like part of her body, grown instead of made. Her eyes were closed, and she wasn't moving. She didn't look human, not at all. The other soldiers backed away. One of them whispered, "That's not one of ours." Ray stepped closer. He could see her face, no sharp lines, strange markings, but also sadness. She didn't look angry. She looked tired, weak, and even though everyone called her a monster, something about her made him stop. Her body was built for battle, yes, but her eyes, just barely open now, didn't match. They were filled with fear. "She's dangerous," said one of the officers. "We should call in a drone and end this right here." But Ray shook his head. "No, look at her. She's not fighting. She's not even awake." The alien girl opened her eyes slowly. The glow in them was dim, like fading light. For a second, her eyes met Ray's. There was no hate there, just confusion, and something else. Something human. The command came. In minutes later, "Take her in alive." Command wanted to study her, so they did. Back at the Earth's facility, she was kept behind walls of steel and glass. Soldiers stood watch around the clock. Scientists scanned her from every angle. She didn't speak, didn't move, just sat on the floor, silent, eyes down, as if she had already lost. Ray visited her room every day. He brought books, food, soft music. She didn't react at first, but after a few days, she looked up at him when he entered. No words, just eye contact. It was enough to keep him coming back. One afternoon, Ray brought her a notebook and pen. "If you can't speak," he said gently, "maybe you can draw." She looked at the items in his hands. Slowly, she reached out and took them. Her fingers were long and strange, but they held the pen like she'd done it before. She drew a circle first, then another, then a star. After that, she looked at Ray and placed her hand over her chest. "Is that your home?" Ray asked. She nodded. He pointed at the star. "Danger." She looked away, silent again. Each day after that, she drew more. A city, a burning sky, creatures that looked like her, but different. Then chains wrapped around her, tightening. Ray began to understand. She hadn't come to fight. She had been sent. Forced. Still, no one trusted her. Officers believed she was playing a game. Some wanted to send her off-world. Others feared she might break free. But Ray kept defending her. "She's not our enemy," he told them. "She's someone who needs help." They didn't listen. Then, during a medical test, something unexpected happened. A glowing pattern appeared on her skin. The scientists ran scans. "It's a message," one whispered. "A signal." Ray was called into the lab. The alien girl sat there, breathing heavily. Her eyes found his again. She looked frightened. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer with her voice. Instead, she picked up the pen and wrote one word on the table. "Coming." "What's coming?" Ray asked quietly. She pointed up. Later, that night, Ray sat in the observation room, watching her through the glass. She was asleep, or pretending to be. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at him. Not like a monster, not like a soldier, like someone who didn't want to be alone anymore. And he knew deep down whatever was coming. She wasn't the threat. She might be their only hope, but no one else could see it yet. Not until they looked into her eyes. Asterisk. Rain tapped lightly against the glass walls of the research facility as Captain Ray Mercer sat in silence, watching the alien girl through the observation window. She hadn't spoken again since the night she wrote that one chilling word, "coming." Since then, the lab had been working non-stop, trying to decode her biology. Every test brought back the same strange result. Her body wasn't just different, it was changing. Cells moved and shifted in ways human science couldn't explain. Some called it evolution, others called it programming, but none of them could say why. She still didn't speak much, but she drew, every day, with the same focus and patience. Mountains, suns, strange machines, and faces, some kind, some cruel. Ray watched every sketch like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. She was trying to say something. He just didn't know what. That afternoon, she drew something different. A small creature with wide eyes and soft skin, nothing like the machines or soldiers from before. Ray pointed at it. "Is this your friend?" She nodded. He smiled. "What happened to them?" She hesitated, then slowly turned the page. The next drawing showed the same creature, only now trapped inside a metal shell. It looked stronger, but lifeless. Ray's smile faded. "It changed your people, didn't they?" She looked up, eyes shining a little brighter than usual. She pressed her hand to her chest again, the same gesture she had used before, but this time, she added something new. Her fingers spread, then closed tightly. "Taken," that's what she meant. Something about the way she moved that day told Ray more than words ever could. She hadn't just been sent here by force. She had lost everything: her world, her body, her voice, all replaced with something colder. Later that evening, Ray took her drawings to the command council. They looked at the pages, flipping through them quickly, not really seeing the story behind the lines. One general shook his head. "They're just pictures. Mercer, we need answers, not art." "She's trying to communicate," Ray said calmly. "She's showing us what happened to her, what might happen to us, or what she plans to do." Someone else added, "You're too close to this." Ray didn't argue. He just picked up the last drawing, the one with the creature in the metal shell. "If you're wrong, we'll never see it coming." That night, Ray returned to the observation room. She was awake, sitting near the window, watching the rain fall. For the first time, he entered the room instead of staying behind the glass. She didn't move, just followed him with her eyes. He sat down across from her on the cold floor. "Do you miss it?" he asked softly. "Your home?" She nodded slowly. "Is it still there?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Ray didn't press her. Instead, he pulled a small music player from his jacket and placed it gently between them. A soft melody began to play, something slow, human, and warm. She tilted her head slightly, listening. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. They softened, just a little. "You don't have to be alone here," Ray said. "I don't think you want to be what they made you." She looked at him, really looked at him. Then, very quietly, she whispered, "Nain." He blinked, surprised. "My name," she nodded. "Ray," he said with a small smile. "Ray Mercer." There was a pause. Then she pressed a finger to her own chest and whispered, "Zura." Ray's heart skipped. For the first time, he wasn't talking to a creature or a soldier or a science project. He was talking to someone with a name, a past, and maybe even a future. Zura. The next morning, Ray was called to the command center. A new alert had arrived from Earth's orbital watch stations. Something had entered the edge of the solar system. Slow, silent, massive. Ray looked at the report, then back at Zura's last message. "Coming." He didn't say a word. He just walked quietly back toward the observation room, hoping he still had time to understand her fully before it was too late. A quiet alarm pulsed across the underground base. Soft red lights blinked in the corners of the hallways, but there was no panic, yet only confusion. In the lab, where Zura was kept, the air had grown strangely heavy. Not dangerous, just tense, as if something deep inside the walls was holding its breath. Captain Ray Mercer stood in front of the reinforced glass again. Zura sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, her body still as stone. But the air around her shimmered faintly, barely noticeable, unless you were looking closely. "Her vitals are rising," said one of the scientists behind Ray. "It's like something's waking up inside her." Ray didn't answer. He had already noticed it. The soft hum, the tiny flickers of light beneath her skin. She wasn't changing, she was remembering. Suddenly, the lights above flickered once, then twice, and then, without warning, a drone inside the room sparked and jerked to life. Its programming scrambled. It spun wildly in the air and shot forward toward her. Ray shouted before anyone could react, "Stop it, shut it down." But the drone didn't stop. Zura's eyes opened, and then something strange happened. She moved not to defend herself, but to protect someone else. In one fast motion, she turned her body between the drone and the glass. The drone crashed into her shoulder and shattered to pieces. She didn't even flinch. Her glowing skin absorbed the hit like water on stone, but her eyes, they were locked on Ray. He stepped back in shock, not from fear but surprise. She had saved him again. Security rushed in, weapons raised, unsure of what to do, but Ray lifted his hand. "Stand down," he said firmly. "She's not attacking." Zura stood slowly, her body calm, her face unreadable. She turned to Ray and gently pressed her hand against the glass, over where he had been standing. A soft blue light spread from her fingertips. It wasn't threatening, it was a message. Later, Ray sat with the scientists, reviewing the footage. Why would she do that? Someone asked. She had a chance to escape. She's trying to show us something, Ray replied quietly. She's not what we think. The scientists were still unsure, but one of them had noticed something in the data. Look at this, she said, pulling up the vitals. Her energy levels spiked before the drone malfunctioned. She may not just be reacting, she might be connected to something bigger. Ray leaned forward. Like what? Maybe she's not just one of them, the scientist said slowly. Maybe she's something they built, or something they fear. Ray remembered her drawings, the way she showed creatures like her being changed, remade, covered in armor. They hadn't been born like that. They were shaped, rebuilt for a purpose. He returned to Zura's room later that night. This time, she was standing, waiting. Walked up to the glass. That drone, you knew it was coming, didn't you? She gave a slow nod. Did they make you like this? She paused, then reached for the notebook again. On a blank page, she drew a figure her own shape. Then another figure standing above her. Tall, dark, with long arms reaching toward her. Wires, chains, lights, a machine, or something pretending to be alive. She drew herself again, but this time her face was blank, her eyes closed. Ray looked at it, trying to understand. They turned you into a fighter. Zura nodded. But why? She turned the page again and drew Earth, then a line, then her people, then the machine again. It hit Ray like a weight. You weren't just a warrior, you were a warning. Zura looked at him. For the first time, there was something sharp in her expression, urgency. That night, Ray went through old communications, trying to find patterns in the quiet signals that had been picked up near Earth's orbit. He matched them against Zura's drawings, the timings of her energy spikes, and the faint transmissions from space. It started to make sense. The thing that changed Zura, whatever power had reshaped her, was moving closer. Not fast, but steady. Careful. Ray wrote his report and handed it to the council the next day. Something is coming, he told them. And I don't think we're ready. One general shook his head. You're basing this on drawings. Ray pointed to Zura's latest sketch, an image of the Earth, with shadows approaching from above. She didn't draw fear, Ray said softly. She drew a memory. And if her memory was real, then Earth was facing something far worse than war. It was facing something that made war. The air inside the Earth council chamber was heavy with debate. Screens flashed with reports from distant satellites, each showing the same thing, faint signals approaching from the outer edge of the solar system. They were slow, almost silent, but consistent, like footsteps too far away to hear clearly, yet close enough to feel. Some believed it was just space noise. Ray Mercer knew better. He stood alone, presenting Zura's sketches and decoded patterns. She's trying to warn us, he said calmly. She's seen them before. A few council members scoffed. You trust her drawings more than our defense systems. I trust what I've seen in her eyes, Ray replied. She's not guessing. She remembers. But trust was still hard to earn, especially from people who had only seen Zura as a prisoner, not as a person. While the council argued, down below in the deep lab corridors, Zura sat alone in her containment room. No music, no drawings, no visitors since the drone incident. She had been moved to a more secure area. No windows, no direct contact, only cameras. She hadn't spoken or drawn since, not out of fear, out of choice. When Ray came to visit her again, they spoke without words. He placed his hand gently against the glass, and after a long pause, she mirrored it. Her skin shimmered, lightly, reacting to his presence. You knew they wouldn't listen, he said quietly. Didn't you? Zura's gaze didn't shift. She remained still, but her eyes carried something different, now not just sadness, but understanding. Ray sat on the bench outside her room for hours that day, thinking, if she really had been made into something unnatural, something designed to fight and survive, then maybe that part of her still existed inside. But what he had seen, over and over, was the part she had chosen to show him. Her memories, her warnings, her silence, in moments where anger might have taken over. She wasn't a danger. She was a message. Back in the council room, the military presented a new plan, a test. They wanted to push Zura to activate her old abilities and see what she was really capable of. Not out of curiosity, but to prepare her as a possible defense system. Ray stood against it. "She's not a weapon," he said. "She's not a machine you can turn on and off. She might be the only one who can stop what's coming," they argued. "She might be the only one who chooses not to," he replied. But the vote went forward. That night, Zura was quietly transferred to a larger chamber simulation room designed for high-risk environments. She didn't fight it. She walked silently, her feet bare on the metal floor. Her expression unreadable. Ray was not allowed inside the control center. He watched through a secure screen as lights activated around her, and the room shifted into a holographic war zone. Machines appeared, hollow models meant to mimic threats. Soldiers watched closely from behind reinforced glass. She didn't move. The first wave of drones flew toward her. She stood still. Then a second wave. Still, nothing. Finally, the program escalated. The drones came faster, louder, trying to trigger a reaction. Then it happened. Zura's eyes lit up with a soft blue glow. Not violent, not sharp. Her feet lifted slightly from the ground. Her skin began to shift, but not into anything monstrous. It was like her body was remembering its shape, what it had once been built to do. She didn't attack. Instead, she dissolved. The drones not with force, but with energy that unraveled their data mid-air. One by one, they fell gently to the floor, untouched, as if they had simply forgotten how to fly. The scientists were stunned. Ray just smiled. She had passed the test not by showing power, but by showing control. Later, in a quiet debriefing room, Ray sat across from her. For the first time, there were no walls between them, just silence. "You could have destroyed everything," he said softly. Zura looked at him, and her voice returned calm, steady, human-like. "I chose not to." Ray nodded. "Why?" She took a long pause, then tapped her chest. "Not who I am." There were still questions, still fear. But for Ray, one thing had become clear. Zura wasn't Earth's enemy. She wasn't Earth's weapon. She was Earth's mirror, showing them what it meant to choose peace over power. And not everyone was ready to look. Asterisk clouds rolled over the capital city like slow-moving waves, heavy and silent. On the tallest tower of Earth's defense center, warning lights blinked a steady rhythm, but no sirens rang yet. Everything felt paused, like the world was holding its breath. Ray Mercer stood beside one of the outer windows, looking up at the sky. There was nothing to see with the eye. No ships, no movement. But deep space sensors didn't lie. Something had entered the inner solar system, still days away, but large, too large to ignore, and silent. Always silent. Down below, inside the main chamber of the command facility, leaders discussed possibilities. They spoke in careful words, protocols, procedures, emergency plans, but none of them could say for sure what was coming. The only one who might have known was Zura, and she was gone. Not lost, not missing. She had made a decision 3 nights ago. Without speaking, without writing, she had simply walked into the chamber where Ray sat, placed her palm on the glass, and whispered one word: "Goodbye." Then she allowed herself to be taken by security, moved to a sealed chamber deep underground. She hadn't resisted. She hadn't explained. Ray had begged the council to let her speak. They refused. They believed she might still be a danger, especially now that something from her memories, something from her world was approaching Earth. But deep inside, Ray understood why she went willingly. She was afraid of what she might become if she tried to fight again. She didn't want to be a weapon, but sometimes choices are made for you. That morning, as the clouds continued to gather, the skies above Earth darkened, not from rain, but from sudden power outages. Across every major city, lights dimmed, communications flickered. A low hum filled the air, too low to hear, but strong enough to feel in the chest. People stepped outside, looking up, confused. Something had arrived. From orbit, Earth's satellites sent back the first images. A single ship, or maybe something greater. It wasn't shaped like anything human. Its surface moved, pulsed, like it was alive. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It simply watched. Ray was called to the war room. Generals stood with folded arms, scanning the data. "We need to send a signal," one said. "Let them know." "We're not afraid," Ray interrupted. "That's not what they want." "How would you know?" Someone snapped. Ray looked at the screen, his voice steady. "Because Zura never attacked us. She didn't need to. She could have ended everything, and she didn't. This is the same test. They want to see who we choose to be. Before a decision could be made, Alarms flared across the city, not from the sky but from beneath. Some of the lower defense centers had been breached, not by enemies, by machines already hidden on Earth, long before anyone realized. They weren't attacking, only disabling, silencing weapons, blocking communication. The enemy wasn't here to fight, they were here to unarm. Within minutes, Earth's systems were falling apart, not through destruction, but through quiet shutdowns. The world felt like it was slipping into silence, and far beneath the surface, in her quiet chamber, Zura felt it too. She stood, barefoot on the cold floor, her hand resting on the wall. Her skin shimmered against oft pulses of color traveling across her arms. The old part of her, the part built for war, was waking up, not because she wanted it to, because the world needed it. She closed her eyes and listened not to orders, not to fear but to something older, deeper, something still alive inside her. Memories of her home, her people, the day they turned her into something else, the day she walked away from all of it, trying to hold on to a part of herself they hadn't erased. Then she saw it in her mind again, Ray's eyes, calm and steady, the way he never looked at her with fear, the way he believed she could choose, and so she did. The floor beneath her shifted. Alarms went off as the chamber locks failed on their own. No attack, just power rerouted, as if the Earth itself was letting her out. By the time Ray reached the lower halls, Zura was already there, not as a weapon, not as a prisoner, but standing in the center of the hall, calm, composed, surrounded by light. She looked at him and said just two words, "I'm ready." Ray didn't ask what she meant, he simply nodded. Together, they walked toward the surface, because whatever had come from the sky wasn't just testing Earth's defenses, it was testing its heart, and Zura was ready to answer. Soft golden light filtered through the clouds the next morning. Earth had not been attacked, no buildings had fallen, no weapons had been fired. The sky was quiet, and the massive ship still floated above the atmosphere, waiting. It hadn't moved since it arrived, but everything on the ground had changed. Ray stood at the edge of the defense tower, looking up at the hovering shape. It didn't look like a ship, it looked more like a shadow made from light and metal, wrapped around itself, pulsing like a heartbeat. Machines inside Earth's systems still weren't working properly. Drones stayed grounded, scanners kept resetting, missiles wouldn't launch, satellites lost signal every few minutes. It was as if Earth had been told to sit still, and Earth did. For the first time in its history, humanity stood completely powerless, and completely unharmed. Deep inside the facility, Zora sat quietly on a bench in the observation wing, but this time, there was no glass between her and the humans. No guards, no chains, only silence. People walked past her now without turning away. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with quiet respect. A few even smiled. A young technician, barely out of training, brought her a small tray of fruit and placed it gently beside her. She didn't speak, just bowed her head and walked away. Zura stared at the tray, not because she needed the food, but because no one had ever offered it to her before. Not as a soldier, not as a weapon, just as someone who was there. Ray entered a few minutes later, holding a datapad. He didn't speak at first, he just sat down beside her, watching the slow-turning clouds outside the long window. "We still don't know what the ship wants," he said after a while. No signal, no message, no demands. Zura didn't look at him. "They don't speak with words," Ray turned. "Then how do they speak?" She closed her eyes, with memories, with silence, with choice. He didn't fully understand, but somehow, it made sense. The ship wasn't here to destroy, it was here to reflect, to wait, to see who humanity really was when no one was watching, or maybe, when someone was. Ray handed Zura the datapad. "We've collected some of your drawings. The council wants to archive them as part of first contact history, if that's okay." Zura held the pad gently, scrolling through the pictures she had made weeks ago before anyone trusted her, before anyone even knew her name. She paused at one image, a simple sketch of two hands, one human, one alien reaching toward each other. She turned the screen to Ray. "This was before I knew what it meant. And now?" he asked. Zura looked at him, her eyes calm. "Now, I know it's a question." He nodded slowly. "And your answer?" She turned her hand upward, palm open. Ray placed his hand in hers. It was quiet in that room, but something changed, not around them, but above them. the ship still slightly in the sky, barely noticeable, but it moved. For the first time since arriving, it changed its position. Some said it was scanning. Others said it was preparing to leave. Zura said nothing. She stood up and walked to the wide glass wall, placing her hand gently on it. Her fingers glowed with a soft, peaceful blue. The same light began to spread through the floor beneath her, harmless, beautiful, like waves of gentle energy flowing through the building. Machines nearby began to work again, not fully but enough. Enough to show that Earth's systems were no longer being held down, just watched. She turned to Ray and spoke quietly. They see now. See what? He asked. That we remember, she said. That we can choose. That evening, news spread around the world. No attack, no invasion, no threat, just a presence in the sky, and a message, even if unspoken. Who are you when no one tells you who to be? Zura didn't return to her chamber after that day. She was offered a position, an official one, not military, not science. Something. New Earth's first ambassador to the unseen. Ray stood beside her as she walked into the council chamber. This time not as a figure of fear, but as a voice of understanding. Her past still lived in her bones, but her future now belonged to Earth.